Good morning, Dean. We can see you, so perhaps turn your screen off.
Oh,
We'll
okay.
come to you in a minute. Please don't
Okay,
turn your
sure.
screen off. And welcome, everybody. Dean, could you? Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to the ICG's Digital Academy webinar series. I'm Lucy Wernick, the ICG manager, stepping in with running our webinars before we hand over to ICG member Naomi Gublar.
Hi. Hi,
Hello.
everyone. Hi, Lucy. I didn't know we were going to be handing over to me. I was just dipping in as an attendee. Sorry.
Okay, Naomi, I'm just going to mute. Okay. So today's webinar is by Dean Russell of Win That Pitch, but we'll hear more about Dean very soon. Just for those who aren't members or who aren't familiar with the ICG is a hub of around 400 independent market researchers within the UK and abroad. We collaborate and share knowledge and experience for the benefit of members, clients, and advertisers. So if you're a client or an agency, find your perfect consultant or team of consultants through us. If you're a freelancer or small business, please join us. If you're a supplier of research or business services, advertise with us. We look forward to hearing from you soon. We are grateful to Perspective Research Services for sponsoring this webinar. Perspective Research Services are a data collection and data processing specialist agency with 22 years experience, offering international CATI, nationwide face-to-face qualitative services, home and focus studios and mystery shopping. Note their qualitative services on the left here, their quant services on the right, and their additional services at the top and the bottom. Remember, our webinars qualify for MRS CPD certification. If you need a certificate, send an email to me at admin@theicg.co.uk or download it from our website. Throughout the webinar, you can ask questions by typing them into the chat box that you'll see on your screens. Please do ask as many questions as you can. We'll ask a range of questions at the end. If you think of a question after the webinar, you can either send it to me and I'll forward it, or send it to Dean directly. And also, if you wish to tweet about this webinar, please do so, copying in at the ICG. Next webinar for your diaries will be Thursday the 15th of August and is about what you need to know about working with children, run by Nikki Carrette of Sherbet Research. So look out for details soon. So now introducing our speaker for today. Dean Russell is founder and CEO of Win That Pitch. Win That Pitch help individuals, teams and organisations develop winning presentations and pitches, offer services that can help anyone achieve success, covering every aspect of the process, from briefing to proposals, pitching to post-pitch. Dean is also the author of How to Win, the ultimate professional pitch guide, and is a recognised entrepreneur, leadership and pitch advisor. He is a fellow at the RSA, a former vice chairman of the Federation of Small Business, has recently been appointed as a startup mentor for London and Partners, and is also an adjunct lecturer for Hull Business School. Exhausting, a very busy man, Dean. So please welcome Dean. Over to you. Just going to give you presenting rights.
Brilliant. So hopefully, can you see my screen now? Is that, yeah, let me go. Here we go. Fantastic. Can you all see that?
We can see you. That's
Brilliant.
it. We've got you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, first of all, Lucy and the ICG team, thank you for inviting me to speak this morning. I know I'll aim to cover about half an hour during the session, and we've got plenty of time for questions and Q&A at the end. One of the key things with pitching is that you don't want to kill people by death by PowerPoint, so I'll aim not to do that as well, and hopefully you'll all enjoy the session. So just a little bit of background to me. I think the main thing just to start with really is that in terms of my experience, I have worked over the past 20 or so years working in the PR, comms, digital industry, and through that worked with almost every sector in pitches, from pitching for grants, pitching for big new business, pitching for multi-million-pound opportunities, but also for startups to win their first ever project. So it really does range. And because of that, I've been very fortunate that I've written a lot of articles and done various broadcasts in various guises, including in the political space. In terms of how to win and the purpose for being here today, Win That Pitch and How to Win, the book itself, really were born out of the fact that there was not much out there for traditional style business pitches. What I found was that when I was helping brands and agencies and individuals with pitching, there's an awful lot out there around Dragon's Den style pitching, that 20-minute, asking for investment. But there was less advice out there for pitching for business or for growth or for grants and so on. So really it was born out of that. And I'll share some of the learnings from the book and also from our CPD accredited workshops as we go through. And if you hang around till the end, we've also got a great offer for you in partnership with the ICG, which is a huge discount on our online course. So to start off with, I think it's important to really ask that question, which is, what is a pitch? And in my mind, and from all the research I've done, and I've read every book you can imagine, I've probably missed a few, but I've read every book, I've chatted to pitch experts around the world, people who I respect immensely, and also from my own experience. And for me, a pitch comes down to 3 core elements, and it's a very simple equation. A good pitch has a USP, so defining why you're unique, so what your brand values are effectively, and what is it that you're trying to do that's different effectively. So what's your USP, what's your unique selling point, plus the storytelling element. How are you telling your pitch in a story? What is it that you're using to compel people to get involved in what you do and start to really believe and have energy behind what you're doing and buy into it? And I'll be covering this in a few moments as well. And finally, especially in the commercial space, it's also about sales. Are you able to convert somebody to not just buy into the concept, but also to buy physically into what you're doing so that you can make a profit? Now, in some cases, and I've had conversations with so many people about pitch and presentations over the past few years, and in particular since I wrote the book, is that everybody has a slightly different view of a pitch. Some people, a pitch is literally just standing up, presenting and trying to sell. For some people, a pitch is the proposal writing. They might not even get to stand up and present to the client. And for some people, a pitch is literally just trying to convince their colleagues to buy into what they're trying to do. So there's a whole range of things that a pitch is. And often it comes down to leadership and clarity of vision. But the very core of it, if you think of it in these 3 ways, it makes life much easier when you're structuring the pitch and also when you're trying to understand what you're trying to achieve out of the back of it. And the How to Win book goes into this in a lot of detail, and I'll try and cover some of the salient points in the short time that we have in this session. But to start off with, think about your brand value. So when you started up your business or when you decided to do what you do, there must have been something about it that you loved that was different from everything else that was on offer to you. So even if you work in a company and perhaps you don't run your own business and perhaps don't even pitch much, just think about what is it that drove you to do what you do today? What is it that really excited you and got you excited to do something different? And what's unique about it? It could be that it's family friendly. It could be that it's the best quality service or product on the market. It could be 1,000 different things, and only you will be able to define what that uniqueness is. But if you have a really clear idea of what's unique and what the brand values are that you're putting into that service or product or offering, you can start to really get a sense of what's the hook effectively for the client or for the prospect to actually buy into what you're doing, and to be able to then say, well, look, this is unique. This is what we do, and nobody else does it. So first of all, you need to really understand what it is that you do that's unique. Secondly, the storytelling part is really important, because since day one of us being cavemen or going back in time, human beings have always used storytelling as a way to teach people and a way to get them to remember things. Now, the reality is with storytelling is that stories that we see on films today have very much a similar arc to stories that go back to fairy tales and to religious tales over the many years. And so there's only so many types of story arcs that are out there. I'm not going to go into detail around storytelling today because it will take too long to really do it justice. But the thing with storytelling is just trying to remember what's the arc, what's the journey you want somebody to go through on the pitch. And often that journey starts with a challenge. What's the issue that they're facing that you can solve? And that's where your unique proposition comes in, because that's when you're saying we're the only ones who can solve this in this way, or with this product, or with this service. So the storytelling has to take your audience on a journey to believe in what you're doing and believe in what you're saying, so that they can then get to the mindset in their own minds that what you're doing and what you're selling is relevant to them. And then that's when it gets to the sales. Now, sales is often an area where people get very scared. People don't like selling. And many people, especially those that I know in the research area or technical arenas, and also in PR and comms, they feel very comfortable, say, pitching to a journalist a story, but they don't feel necessarily comfortable selling to a client. And it's very natural. Now, the reality with sales is that there's a really psychological route in how you can sell and feel comfortable selling. And again, we won't go into this in massive detail today, but what I will say is that what you have to think about as sales is it's an opportunity for you to do more of what you love doing. If you think of it not in terms of you trying to push something onto somebody and force them to buy a product or a service, but actually giving them the opportunity to improve their lives, add value to what they do, and for you to continue to do what you love doing, then actually the proposition's very different. And so when you think about sales, don't think of it as a selling thing. Think of it as an opportunity to get more people on board, a more opportunity to add value to their lives. And hopefully with what you do, you will be able to do that, but also an opportunity for yourself to do more of what you love doing. And it might be that if you sell widgets, selling more widgets means that you get to perhaps go on more holidays. But as long as those widgets are actually adding value to your end customer, then there's nothing wrong with that. But that's really about that converting to customers. But you can't force something on somebody because they will get buyer regret. So you have to think about sales as this idea of converting customers, but getting them to buy into the idea of buying from you or purchasing your services or using what you have on offer. If you get those three parts right, it's a really powerful sell, because you've got the brand values, what's unique about you. You've got the storytelling, and that storytelling arc is taking somebody on a journey so they can visualize in their own mind what it is, what life will be like with your product or service as part of their lives. And in many ways, if you work in teams pitching, what you want to be able to get across in that story is getting them to think about what will life be like working with you as a team. So it's about projecting into the future what that will look like. And the sales piece then is converting them and getting them to agree to do something, whether it's a trial product, whether it's a purchasing a widget, or whether it's to buy into you as a team or as an individual to sell your services. You get those three things right, you'll be in a really powerful place to be able to pitch well. The second thing you need to really think about is what's your pitch worth. So that the challenge quite often with pitching is that you end up in a situation where everything's pitchable. You know, you may well want to win every bit of work that's going out there, but the reality is, are you going to be able to service it to the level that you would like to? So your pitch isn't just worth the monetary value. Your pitch is actually also worth the longevity of your business. Have you got the right clients to be able to win more new clients? Are you pitching to get a client that's a portfolio client, in which case you might be looking to see what opportunities are out there, so that you might have to tick a bunch of boxes to win that next big level and scale up to your business. So for example, if you work in an area where the next scale up for you to win the next big opportunities that you need experience A, B, and C, so it could be, you know, a particular sector or industry or a particular niche market that you've got experience in, think about the opportunities when you pitch for your clients to go for opportunities that will allow you to tick those three boxes. So when you're pitching, don't just think about the monetary value and the profit, which is of course critical for you to be able to survive in your business, but also think of the opportunities around what new experiences can you get, what new opportunities to increase your portfolio of services, what opportunities are there to bring new people on board. But also you have to think about what the cost is of the pitch. What you don't want to do is win a pitch at all costs. What I mean by that is when you think about the pitch that you develop, I've learned this from my own personal experience. I've won clients before that my teams have then hated working on. And so they've been unhappy about it. They haven't enjoyed working on it. And ultimately that reduces morale, and it can really affect your business and affect your growth. So think about what it's worth, but also what's the cost of it. If you're trying to win at all costs, then the risk is you'll win projects that perhaps aren't right for you. You may not be able to deliver them to the right level, in which case you might let clients down, and that's not good for your reputation. It might well be that you win a client and go for an opportunity that actually the client's just not the right fit for you, and you're going to go for it and not win the pitch. In the meantime, you might have lost another pitch because of that you should have won. So there's a whole load of processes that you need to think about at the briefing stage to understand, what's this pitch really worth? What's the brief and the opportunity really worth to you, both as an opportunity, but also a cost? And the thing I always say about pitching is that a pitch isn't necessarily won in the boardroom when you're stood up presenting. It's really won in the early stages when you're deciphering the brief, really getting underneath and getting to grips with what the client's looking for, and from that understanding where you can add the most value. It's better to go for 3 opportunities that you can go full out on and feel confident you've got a good chance of, than going for 10 and spreading your bets, but also potentially losing the 3 that you could have won. So you have to really think about, what's this pitch worth, not just monetary value and profit, but also what's it worth to the business. And that's why I say to a lot of startups I've worked with and smaller organizations is that, when you started your organization, you may well have had as I call it, a startup dream. And that startup dream, is, we're going to make money, perhaps spend time on the beach, have more time with our family. How fantastic. But the reality is, after about 6 months of, having the energy of perhaps leaving a company you're in and setting up on your own, or being part of a small startup, is that you end up in a situation which is the dream bit goes, and then you're just in startup mode. And the challenge with that is that that's when the admin comes on board, and that where the day-to-day happens, and the accounting and the managing people and all the stuff that you might have left your existing business so that you can focus on the startup dream. You lose all the bits about the dream and then start just doing the boring stuff, because your business is trying to grow. And what that means is, for the pitch process, is that often the reason why a lot of organizations win a lot of work in their first few months or first few years is because the founder or the people who really were behind it still had that passion to go out there and sell without really having to take that much effort. But then as they start to grow, they need to win more. There's more pressure to win more projects, and there's more pressures internally to manage the team and keep the admin going and make sure you're ticking all the boxes. And so the passion diminishes, because actually the energy is not there, because you're tired and you haven't got the processes in place. And that's part of the reason why I wrote my book, How to Win, is because actually the checklists that are in that are designed to make sure that you don't miss the stuff that's really important, but that you can create a routine around and manage that. And I've found through the courses that I've been developing, the CPD accredited workshops and the online masterclass, is that when people have been doing that, they're like, oh my gosh, it's not so much an epiphany moment of, oh, I didn't realize I needed to do that, but it's almost a case of, oh my gosh, I forgot. We used to do that in the early days, or we used to take take something along with us as a reminder to the client around what the quality of the work is. And actually, we don't get times to print that out anymore. We don't get time to do something. So time is always a factor when pitching, and you have to really think about where you're putting your time. Now, one of the things for a lot of organizations is that pitching isn't, as I said, isn't just the presentation. It's actually the proposal, it's writing the brief, it's understanding what the client needs. And that's why I think this quote is so brilliant. And it's, the skill of writing is to create a context in which other people can think. Now, just think about that for a moment. The skill of writing is to create a context in which other people can think. Now, where most people go wrong with pitching and proposals is they try and tell them everything. They try and get everything across all in one go, because they don't want to miss a trick. They don't want to lose the pitch because they didn't tell the client about some important value they can add or important service that actually they realize, oh my gosh, actually that's why you didn't get it, because you didn't tick that box. But the reality is, if you're not thinking about creating context for people to think, they can't imagine themselves working with you. They find it's harder to tell somebody how brilliant you are than to get them to see how brilliant you are. They're more likely to believe somebody else saying how great you are than you saying it yourself. So when you think about the proposal, think about testimonials, think about space for them to take on board what you've just told them. If you work in a space where ideas are important, make sure that there's space for them to take them on a journey around the idea and build up to it, and use small builds to get to the point of telling them a big idea or the big opportunity or the big thought process. Because if you don't do that, what you risk is losing them in the process. What you don't want to do is a tsunami of information where they just are overwhelmed with, oh my gosh, yeah, they can do everything, but we're not quite sure what we need them to do. So you need to think about the structure of how you write a proposal, and also within the pitch. What you don't want to do is overwhelm them, because the classic phrase is that a confused customer doesn't buy. Now, when you look at your proposals, look at your pitches, or even how you develop your own elevator pitch, which we'll come to in a moment, how clear are you on what you're really offering? And again, it goes back to what I said earlier. What's your USP? What's your unique offer? What's the story you're telling, why you're doing it, and getting them on board and understanding the power of what you deliver, and then the sell to convert them to go, oh my gosh, yeah, we need to work with this brand or this agency or this service provider or product. And there's a very simple template for this. And in fact, we're just putting the finishing touches on a new free ebook, which is all about developing your own proposition, that I've been co-authoring with one of our associates who is a former member of Microsoft and has been very much on the other side of the table when doing the pitch process and have been pitched to. And I really recommend you follow this through, and if it's useful after the webinar, I'll gladly share this slide with the ICG to share with you all. But it's very simple. When thinking about your organization and your elevator pitch, if we can call it that, think about who is your customer. So X customer has Y problem. So what's the problem you're solving? What's the challenge they need you to fix for them, which is uniquely solved? So what is it that you do that's specific to you that only you can do by your product, service, or whatever it is you're selling, delivering a certain benefit? And that last word could also be changed to value. So think about it this way. X customer has Y problem, which is uniquely solved by your product service delivering this benefit. Now, all of you on this call, on this webinar, are going to have a different set of answers to that. But try and spend some time, even if it's just half an hour over lunch or an hour, just sit down and see if you can write that sentence in a way that it doesn't sound like your competitors or doesn't sound like some other organization that's out there. If you get that right, you'll be in a really good position, because it's not just about then using this in an elevator or a cocktail party or over coffee. If you get this right, you can then build on this within your wider pitch. So even if you're doing a 3-hour pitch or a 200-page proposal, the purity of this statement around what it is that you're offering will help you then make it clearer to your audience, clearer to your prospects, but also clearer to your team about what it is that you're actually offering and what you're trying to get people on board with. And part of the element of this is when you understand that, you can then start to ask the right questions. So again, in the book and in the course that we deliver, there's a whole load of pieces here around asking the right questions. So, why is somebody going out to a supplier to try and hire a new agency or a new supplier? Is it because they have the one that they've got isn't someone that they like working with anymore? Are they not delivering? Well, if they're not delivering, why are they not delivering? Have they made it impossible for them to deliver? There's lots of things that you need to think about in terms of how you start to develop the process, but you've got to ask the questions up front. And that includes understanding how the budget works, understanding what the compelling reason is why they would choose you and not somebody else, but also understanding why you perhaps shouldn't be working with them. Are they difficult to work with? What's the sentiment from their other former suppliers? Think about the wider context, because that will really help you. And also understanding the small print. What are they really expecting from you? Do their costs include VAT, for example? Are they expecting you to absorb that? Where are they expecting you to be? Are you being expected to work on site? There's lots of questions, and again, I've covered all these off and I'll gladly share some of those in more detail afterwards. The story part for me is really important, because a story arc is really about trying to keep people gripped throughout the whole process. So if you think of the really famous big stories, whether it be Harry Potter, whether it be Star Wars, whether it be Katniss from the Hunger Games, all of those characters actually at the start are facing a challenge, and they may not even realize they're facing a challenge. And by the end of that story, that challenge is solved, usually through that hero arc. Now, I won't go into all of that now because it would take too long. But when you think about those, when you think about the films that you watch or the TV shows that you watch, usually they're around, especially for Hollywood movies, an hour and a half, 2 hours. If you're pitching, often a pitch can be anywhere from 45 minutes up to 2 or 3 hours. So you need to keep people gripped throughout. So you need to tell them a story about what it is that they will get out of being involved with you. But they also need to see themselves as the hero in this. So if they're hiring you, if they're working with you, then they become the hero in that story. They're building this band of suppliers or partners to find the right research to be able to do what they do, or perhaps to solve the problem that they've got in their business. But you need to get them to see themselves working with you or using your product. And that's why when you watch shows like QVC, as much as they're mocked for their sort of their selling technique, actually if you ever watch how they do that, it's often really trying to get people to see themselves using the product. Think about the language that they use. It's very much about you doing something. It's not trying to push or tell somebody what it will be like. It's getting them to think about the problem they'll solve and how that'll fit together. And that really comes down to the show, not tell, and making sure that when you're selling your proposal or bid, you've got a really clear view of showing them what the benefits are, not just telling them. It's much better to try and get people on board and get them to see themselves using your product or your service and getting the right outcome than telling them how important you are and how fantastic you are. You want them to really see that. And that's where testimonials, where product examples, where video, where imagery is so important, because words alone will not be enough. You require them to take the effort to read the words in a long proposal, whereas imagery and getting them to see other people using what you do or the outcomes and the benefits of what you've done, not just the fact that you perhaps offer a service, but what will that mean to them and the impact of that. Now, one of the things I often get asked about, and I'm conscious I don't want to overrun on the session, but one of the things I often get asked about for many people, right from CEOs of big businesses right down to people who are working in businesses and have to stand up at their client meeting, their team meetings every few weeks, is this thing of glossophobia, so the fear of public speaking. And so I thought I'd just quickly touch on that. First of all, if you go to our website, winthatpitch.win, there's a free resources section, and on there you'll see there's a load of free ebooks. There's no catch on that at all. You can download those, and there's one in particular on Breathe, called Breathe, How to Deal with Presentation Nerves. But one of the key things I just wanted to cover on this is that there's this quote by Michael Caine, which I love, which is the basic rule of human nature is that powerful people speak slowly and subservient people quickly, because if they don't speak fast, nobody will listen to them. Now, the problem with being nervous when speaking is that people often speak quickly, and it's a physical reaction because of nerves. You're not breathing in as much oxygen because it goes into shallow breaths, and therefore people tighten up. And then because of that, they look nervous, they don't exude confidence, and therefore the people watching them perhaps don't feel like they know their subject matter as much as they should. So there's a whole load of this in one of our courses that we deliver on, and especially the online masterclass that I'll mention in a few moments. But the key thing I would say to anybody who's nervous with speaking or when developing your pitch, even if you're not nervous and you're the best, most confident speaker in the world, is just make sure you slow down. Think about any speech by a prominent public speaker, whether it be Obama to Winston Churchill, whether it be anyone especially in public life, you'll see that they speak in short sentences. And that means that people can think about what they've said. What that does, it slows things down. Now, often people assume that on stages, the politicians are doing that for applause, and that may well be the case. But what it also does is that those 3-4 word statements means people have that context to think. And that's the same when writing. You want to make sure your headlines and your proposals tell the story and not just tell them what they're about to read. You know, think of the newspapers like the Sun and the Mirror. May disagree with the way that they, you know, what they write about, but actually the headlines are really powerful to get people on board with what they're doing. And within that, there's an element there around body language, making sure you're not folding your arms, you know, feeling tight in, because that will affect you, but also it may give the impression to the person watching you that you're not really interested, or that you're nervous, or just that you're perhaps, you know, you don't really want to be there. And often that's a misunderstanding. And so body language is really key to that. One thing I would say just before I start to round up is be inspired by the best. Watch loads of TED Talks, do all that sort of stuff. Go to events where people that you admire are speaking. You know, people love going to rock concerts or pop concerts and see their famous celebrities on stage to be entertained. But do that for conferences around the UK and elsewhere around the world, so that you get to see speakers, especially within your own industry, and see what they're talking about, but also see how they're talking. You know, what is it that's making them more successful than perhaps other people? And that often can be about how they tell that story. I would say if you watch any TED Talk, you'll see a story being crafted in the space of 5 minutes. And often it starts with the challenge, how it was overcome, you know, the difficulties that were there, and then right through to what I call a closing image, which is the final result. And that also means you need to plan the follow-up. So when you're developing your brief, when you're in that early stage, when you're thinking about your pitch, obviously it doesn't end, and you don't always get told at the end of your presentation or when you send your proposal whether you've won or not. So there's a really important piece here, which I won't go into in detail, but again, it's in the online course, which is about planning the follow-up. And there's about 10 or 15 questions that it's worth being aware of, which will help you, whether you win or lose, to be able to add value to your next pitch. But what I would say is, if you don't follow up and have a really clear understanding of why somebody's not chosen you as much as why they have chosen you, then really the investment you've spent in developing that proposal and that pitch is wasted, because you'll never know what it was. And leaving guesswork or relying on guesswork for why you would win a pitch or why you've lost a pitch is a real waste, because any pitch will take time, which means it takes money. So that means you've invested hard cash into that pitch, whether you've won or lost. So it's not just about the opportunity of what you'll get out of it, but always use every pitch as a learning experience for you, and especially if you have a team, to understand what you could have done differently, but also what worked. You know, sometimes it can be quite surprising. So just to round up, how to win, it's actually on my website at the moment, but I'll be totally honest with you, don't buy it right now because it's going on Amazon in about 2 or 3 weeks time, and it'll be infinitely cheaper. So I'd recommend don't buy my book, but for that reason I've added a really great discount for you for the online course. But the key things here is prepare. You know, the more preparation you do in the pitch, the better. Abraham Lincoln has this fantastic quote, which is that, you know, if he's given 6 hours to chop down a tree, he would use the first 4 to sharpen the axe. Same with pitching. Review the brief, really get to know the client, have chemistry meetings, give them a call, get underneath the why they're pitching and why they're putting a brief out as much as you can. And that includes big government tenders as well. You might not be able to speak to the end client, but what you can do is look at the context of why they're choosing to put that brief out there. Check for red flags. You know, what reasons shouldn't you pitch as much as what reasons you should. Tell a story. Bring the client along in the context of how you write, and that can be in a sentence, and it could be in a 1-page proposal or pitch, or it could be in a 3-hour, epic. Whatever you do, you've got to have the purity of that story. And again, there's lots of techniques I love working with my clients on to help them with that. Be confident. You know, don't go into a pitch feeling unprepared, because that will mean that you won't feel confident. So be as prepared as you can, and always make sure you do that follow-up. So just to finish off on that, I've done a rather perhaps a crazy deal, you could argue, with the ICG as part of this webinar. I have a full, and there's 8 hours worth of video as part of a CPD accredited course on pitching, which goes through everything from deciphering the brief through to writing a winning proposal, how to pitch, and then through to the follow-up. And in there, I've actually made it available for £47, but only for the next, I think, till the end of today. So if you get a chance to go to winthatpitch.win ICG-offer, you won't be able to get through it through the website normally, so you have to go through that link. If you go through that link, you can buy the full course for £47, and that'll be today. And I don't want to do a hard sell, but I really, if you can take advantage of it, I would personally, if you can, because you get CPD points as well as the insights on how to win. And finally, from me, that just means really handing over to Lucy and to say thank you all for listening. I hope you've got some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. That was great. We've got a few questions here. The first one is, well, easy to answer. I can answer that. Will the deck be shared with us, the entire deck? And the answer is absolutely yes. It will go onto our website together with a recording. So yes, and we will circulate that as well. And a couple more questions here. You talked about doing a lot of preparation on the client before the pitch meeting, obviously. Does that extend as far as social media and what they put out on social media? I mean, when do you stop, basically, with your research?
So it depends on the opportunity. One thing I would say, and again, it depends on the size, but also what you don't want to do, I would say there's a balance between creepiness and convenience. And that goes across anything in the social media space. What you don't want to be doing is stalking them on LinkedIn and everywhere. But I don't think it does any harm to connect with them, or at least look at their profile. And there's a whole load of things I could cover on this, and it'd take too long right now. Again, it's like there's a load of this on the course. But I think the key thing I would say is that just try and understand their motivations. So, for example, if you're working with a client and they've just taken over a senior role in an organization, then they might be just wanting to do a total refresh. But they might also want to just be bringing in agencies that they've worked with before, or partners. So you might just be making up the numbers. So you need to understand, why are they doing what they're doing? So if they've just joined, it might be that it's a great opportunity to go in and say, look, we've done a bit of research into the wider context of your organization. These are the things that we think would be relevant to change. If somebody's been there for 15, 20 years, and actually you notice that the last time when you do a bit of digging around that they did a pitch process for, say, 3 or 4 years ago, and they're a big company, it may well be they're just doing it because procurement has told them you have to do a repitch, and they don't actually want to change their agency. So the more you can understand that context, the better. What I would also say, though, is that on the day of the pitch, make sure that if you're going in to present to a client, or if you're having a chemistry meeting, which we didn't cover in detail, but if you're going to meet the client, make sure you check their website out, check any blogs that have gone out there. I swear I've had it myself where in the past where I've gone to meet a client and or I've done a call with a client and I found out that their CEO changed that morning, and I'd done all the research beforehand, I'd checked everything, there was no sign of that. And then that morning that had happened, and because I'd been busy traveling on the train, I hadn't picked it up. So just make sure that you do your research. And the reason being isn't just to wow them with your insight, because you don't want to overly do it. But what you do want to do is make sure that you're going into this with your eyes open. I genuinely mean it when I say that, the pitches are the foundations for your picture at the start, but also there are pitches that you just shouldn't go for, that might sound great on paper and might look like a big opportunity, but could just be stopping you from winning the pitches that you could win right now. So doing that research will really make a difference to that, and understanding the motivations of who's in the room is really important. And then one final point on that, and this is something I've done before for pitches, and it probably sounds a bit weird, but it can be quite helpful. When you're pitching as a team, you really want to try and man mark, if you can call it that. So like in football, so obviously if you're watching the women's football at the moment, it's fantastic. And, and you'll see within that how they mark their opposition, the defense and the attack and so on. It's the same within a pitch. If you've got a team pitch and you've got on the opposite side of the table, there's going to be someone from accounts and someone who's the day-to-day operations and perhaps the creative person and so on. Make sure you're aware not just of them as a group, but as individuals, so that on your team, you can make sure that you can have the right conversations and have the one-on-one conversations. And one of the things that I've done before, especially for really big pitches, is sometimes actually get photos off LinkedIn of the client and put them on the wall in the pitch room beforehand. So when you're preparing, you can physically see and mentally see who it is you're pitching to. And the reason for that, and we didn't cover this in the session really, is that the more familiar you are through your imagination, through mindfulness, through thinking and the psychology of who you're going to see, and that includes the room setup, it includes the technology. The more prepared you are for the environment you're going into, the more familiar you'll feel, and therefore the more confident. So a lot of pitching is sort of ticking off lots of little details so that you can really focus on what you do best, whether that's research or communications or whatever it might be that you do. You want to make sure that all the other bits are looked after. And again, that's where the book came out of, because it started off as a 4-page checklist actually of things to think about in a pitch, and then it was 8 pages, then 12, and then it ends up being an entire book about the pitch process, because actually there's lots of little details that if you can get right and just make a matter of course, you can really then focus on wowing the client with your USP, with your storytelling and a compelling offer.
Great, thank you. A couple of other questions. Are pitches stronger if you take someone with you who may have other expertise, i.e. like another independent, say from ICG members, or does it look like a weakness?
No, I think if you're showing, it does depend. I mean, that's a really, really great question. It really depends on what you're pitching. If you're going in and you're, it looks like you just can't do it, then of course that will look like a weakness. But I think if you're going in and you're all prepared and you've pitched together and developed and rehearsed, I mean, rehearsals are so important. That's really key. So, you know, back in the day when I used to work on very, very big web projects, quite often we'd have a third party come in who was perhaps a IT company around, say, the server side, or you know, the infrastructure or the content management system. So we would pitch together. Now they weren't part of our team, but they were filling a gap that we knew we couldn't fill. But what you wouldn't want to do is just rock up on the day, go into your pitch together and have them do their little bit and then you do your bit, and it doesn't sync together. So if you do go in with somebody else, you have to agree with them, look, there's got to be time to prep together and to rehearse together and make sure that you're selling the same consistent story and benefits to the client. If you don't do that, then understandably the client's going to go, well, what's the real benefit I'm getting here, especially if there are other organizations who can do it all. But I'll gladly, whoever asked the question, so I can't see it on my screen at the moment, but I'll gladly give some pointers and tips if useful afterwards.
Okay. One other question, just to remind people, if you've got any last questions, you can type them into the chat box and I'll pick them up that way. A question about knowing competitors, who else you're pitching against. Mm-hmm. How much of the competitors are we entitled to know, and can we ask about them?
I think it's critical to know, but the catch is they may not tell you. So what you need to do is try and this is where the questions come in as well, post pitch. So the more you pitch, you should try and make sure you understand who's won. Again, the client might not tell you that, but the agency or the organization may well announce it. It might be in the trade press. So the more you know, the better. And the reason being isn't so much to try and mimic or copy them. It's to try and understand where your USP is against theirs so that you can make sure that you cover that. It's also to understand what they position themselves as the USP is so that you can mark that off as well. Because what you don't want to do is go into a pitch and pitch on the premise of winning. I'm trying to think of a good example here. So say if you're going into a pitch, and especially say in the PR space, I know a lot of agencies who will go into pitch and they'll do it and they'll base all of their stuff on their big ideas. That's great. But if there are other agencies that are brilliant at process and good at ideas as well, then they're probably more likely to win it, because they'll go, well, yeah, well, the idea might not be quite right, but we know that they can deliver whatever the big idea is. So we can give them some chance to do that. If you go in and you know that your competitor set has certain USPs, they have a certain story that they tell, you can then just make sure you're clear on how you compare. What you shouldn't do is try and copy them. You don't want to try and go in and sort of create a battle. But the other reason why I think, and more importantly than any of that, is that it's important to know how many competitors you're going for. If you're up against, say, 2 other suppliers, then you probably know that the client has got a pretty clear idea on what they're looking for, because they've whittled it down to say, look, there's only 3 suppliers we're going for, and there's probably a good reason why you're in the room. If it's a totally open tender and they're putting it out to tens of suppliers, then the reality is you're in a bit of a lottery. So the ability and the energy and the time and the effort you need to put in to try and get through to the next round or to win that work is going to be much bigger. And you may well just be competing on price. So you might have the best approach and the best team, but if ultimately it's down to cost, then that's not something you can really deal with unless you are the cheapest. So understanding the competitor set isn't just about who they are, but the more you can understand who you're butting your heads up against on a regular basis, it's really important. But also understanding the context of what work the client has done to get you in the room or on the list. Because if it's a case that they don't know you from Adam and that you're just there to make up the numbers, and that they've got a strong agency relationship already, and that partnership or that supplier is already in the room because they're already working with them, then you may just be making up numbers and therefore, putting a lot of effort in for something you could never win. But on the other hand, if it's a short list and they know who you are, and it's really useful to ask them why you've been selected, why you've been shortlisted, why did they reach out to you? Because it might be for a reason you don't even realize. And a lot of organizations are scared to ask that because they're worried, gosh, what if we get found out? That fraudster mentality that comes in. But actually, it's worth asking clients, as much as you can. And again, in the online course, for the sake of 40, 50 quid, it's worth, because that includes all the lists and includes the book. But the reason why I say isn't to sell it, it's just to say, look, there are questions it's worth always asking all of your prospects at that early stage, because that will allow you to qualify them, but also then allow you to go in with your best foot forward. And then just finally on that, I'm conscious I'm giving a very long answer to a very short question, is that the other part to think about is that if you know you're in the room because they've heard brilliant things about you and brilliant things about your team, you don't want to then spend the first 10 minutes or first 10 pages of your proposal, first 10 minutes of the pitch, justifying being in the room, because they already know that you're great. So actually you can focus that energy and time on delivering to their needs. If they don't know you, then you probably need to spend a bit more time making those proof points. So knowing right at the start why they've chosen you, why they're looking for a new partner or supplier, and and who you're up against in the context of the opportunity, then it just means that you've got more knowledge to be able to give them the right USP about you, the right story, and make the right sell to convert them into a customer. If that makes sense.
It does. And it looks like we haven't got any more questions for now. As I said, if you've got any further questions later on, please direct them either at me and I'll forward them to Dean, or directly to Dean. And thank you all for attending, and thank you so much, Dean, for a fabulous webinar. That was really, really good.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Please do take a note of the link. Like I say, it's a very short-term offer, and I promise I'm not trying to hard sell. I just not normally what we do for that price, so it's worth taking advantage of it.
We'll send an email to you now with the link as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, and thanks to everyone for attending as well. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.